Hi, and welcome to chapter 25, Learning Objective. Let's see, I think we're on 3, right? Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the determinants of productivity, talk about them a little bit, and then ask if those can continue to be engines of growth. Now, I'm going to show you a clip by Warren Buffett. It was in 2017, and it's interesting because I wonder how he would respond today. He makes a statement in there that, and we have all the resources. But even now, thinking about Corona and some of the things that have been happening, it'll be interesting to turn our discussion to looking at those things and its impact on productivity. You can see it right now. Things are backlogged and so on because entire countries were shut down for the coronavirus. So it's fascinating to look at this stuff today. So let's go ahead and let me share my video, share my screen with you, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into that. There we go. I think I got it. Okay. So in this learning objectives, we're going to take a look at the, excuse me, the breakdown of productivity and how we're going to look at it in this class. So remember, there's different ways of looking at productivity. We're going to be looking in the macro class. They look at specifically, or you look at the overall. But we can also look at it on a per unit basis. So for example, if you hire a person, you're going to want to know if they are worth what you're paying them. So we might look at labor per hour. So we would take the hours that an individual works, what were their outputs, and then kind of divide that. Again, remember, the idea is output. What is it that they produce divided by the inputs? And the inputs could be monetary. Okay. So again, why is it so important? Some of the videos I've already showed you have focused on those ideologies. And again, in living standards, we have such a high standard of living here in this country because we have such a high productivity. The 4 determinants of productivity are the physical capital per worker. Now this, we mean machinery, things like that. Think about if you were not able to have access to a computer, maybe your internet went down for a while, you know that's what's happened is it's made you less productive for that particular point in time. Human capital per worker. This looks at the people or the labor component. So the first component, physical capital per worker, that was kind of the capital of our 4 factors of production. Labor, the human capital per worker, this is our labor component. Do we have the people? More so, do we have the skills, the training, all of those things? And again, if you have missed anything, which I think we all have during Corona, it's because restaurants were shut down. They didn't have the human component. And we've even are missing that human component because of social distancing and people isolating themselves. Natural resources per worker takes a look at land. Do we have the space that we need? So the land component to this. And is that land facilitating? Is it clean? Is it usable? All of those things, okay? And technological knowledge kind of goes to what we call human capital. Okay, so these two are kind of together. But again, the technology and the video I'm going to show you with Warren Buffett talks about that technological knowledge. Okay, so physical capital. Do we have the resources and materials that we need? And again, during Corona, you saw that a lot of organizations were unable to produce because they relied on trade areas that were heavily affected by the Corona prior to what we were, China being an instance of that. Human capital, again, the idea of education, training, experience. It takes 8 times more to hire a new employee than it does to keep an old one. So those are some of the things that are we providing what we need to provide. You guys see the value in this or you wouldn't be taking this course. Natural resources, again, things like land, the natural deposits, silicone. There are why are prescription drugs so expensive? Because many times they're farmed or discovered in the Amazon rainforest, and that's the only place it grows. So the natural resources that you need to make those drugs are in rare supply. And then we look at, well, how can we simulate that in a laboratory? Again, technological knowledge, the best ways to produce. Okay. And technological knowledge doesn't necessarily have to be computers. It could also be things like a quicker way of doing something. The first time you do something, you're not very good at it, but you learn shortcuts. You learn better ways of doing it. And if the shortcut produces the same result, and then again, you become more productive. Okay, so here's a big argument that economists look at. World's population about 8 billion, all right? What about these natural resources? If we continue on our current path, futurists do say that our natural resources will limit our growth, particularly when we're using non-renewable. Remember, economists believe all resources are scarce. This will stop economic growth. So this is another reason why, and I'll be honest, I believe in the green movement, and I believe in the sustainability of resources. So this is why economists definitely do look at the sustainability of resources, clean water, air, energy, and we can't do that unless we're a lot better to the planet. My generation was horrible. Future generations are getting much more cognizant of that factor. Again, technological progress can, again, recycling, coming up with new materials, lab created, and so on. So let's go ahead. And at this point, I want you to watch this Warren Buffett piece. It's pretty short. I want to say it's like 2.5, 3 minutes, something like that. But I think hearing from Warren Buffett, right, the market maker, sometimes can make these a little bit more realistic to us. So at this point, I'm going to turn you over to Bloomberg Markets, and then that'll conclude this objective. Thanks. Have a great day.
There's a question of whether monetary policy needs to hand off to fiscal policy. And when Donald Trump was elected president, there was a lot of hopes about tax reform, about infrastructure spending. How critical is that to really robust growth in the underlying economy?
I think our economy will grow. What really drives the economy is the market system, and it's the people like the Jeff Bezoses of the world. And we haven't had good productivity gains lately, but if productivity per capita goes up, the country's wealthier. I mean, it's that simple. So productivity gains and innovation are the key, and they largely will come from the private sector. And the private sector is plenty incentivized to do that sort of thing now, and they've got the resources.
So and typically productivity is tied to capital investment, investment in innovation.
Yeah. Although it's, this phone is pulled out, that's a form of productivity, and that can be R&D and all of that, but it isn't big steel mills or big oil refineries. I mean, wealth 100 years ago with the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, it involved huge capital investment. If you take the 5 largest companies in market cap in the S&P now, they're 10% of the overall S&P. They're all tech companies. You could run all 5 of those companies with no equity capital. So you've got 10% of the S&P with the 5 companies that are making our lives better, but they don't require any equity capital.
Does that suggest maybe we're measuring productivity the wrong way around? Because when we started the measurement, we didn't have things like that little cell phone in your pocket.
Well, that's always a question. I mean, the fact that I can write my annual report a lot easier now, because if I want to check a quotation or a fact, it takes me 15 seconds on search, whereas I used to have to go to the library or right away for, that's made me enormously more productive. Not that anybody necessarily wants the product, but I can get things done a lot faster. Does that get into the GDP figures? I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose some economists would say they really got a way of correcting for all that, but I really think that there have been a lot of improvements in lives. I can play a bridge game now, by getting 3 people together on the internet in 15 seconds or 30 seconds. I used to have to make calls and get my buddies to drive over and all kinds of things. So our lives have gotten a lot better in general than actually I think the GDP figures show.